fitness enthusiasts and ultimate Frisbee aficionados to the TOBU Fitness Podcast, your guide to elevating your game and mastering the art of ultimate Frisbee through the lens of strength and conditioning. Whether you're a seasoned player or just stepping onto the field for the first time, this podcast is your one-stop destination for unlocking your true potential. This is the TOBU Fitness Podcast with your host, certified strength and conditioning coach, Justin Shelby.
Before we get started, I want to talk about one of the sponsors of today's episode, the Ultimate IQ Library. This is a new Patreon that I started with my friend Manny Eckert from Seattle Sockeye, and our goal on this is to put out a ton of exclusive content all about Ultimate Frisbee. So if you're looking to elevate your game and learn a lot more about Frisbee, this is going to be one of the best resources out there for you. On my side, you're going to see a lot of training philosophy, a lot of exercises, drills, warm-ups that you can be doing. And Manny's going to be putting out a ton of film analysis, drills. We've got courses coming out. It's going to be pretty much a one-stop shop all about Ultimate Frisbee education. So if you're interested in learning a lot more about how to get better at Ultimate Frisbee, make sure you sign up for the Ultimate IQ Library. The link is in my bio, links in Manny's bio. We're going to have the info down in the show notes as well.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the TOBU Fitness Podcast. This is episode number 18. We are in full swing in the Ultimate season. So we've got a lot of UFA games going on, PUL games, WUL games. I know in the overseas, in the international scene, summer is right around the corner. We're pretty much right in the beginning of summer. So I know a lot of tournaments are happening overseas as well. I'm not as connected in the international scene, so not entirely sure what the tournament season is like, but I know there's a lot of Ultimate happening across the world now. So yeah, I know a lot of people's minds are on Ultimate, and there's somebody that I've really wanted to talk to for a while, and we've been kind of talking through the DMs a lot about Ultimate, a lot about kind of the training and the health side of things behind Ultimate. So I'm excited for this conversation. Today we got Josh McCune from the Philadelphia Phoenix and the Philadelphia Surge on today. Josh, how are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on, Justin. Been looking forward to this ever since I first slid in your DMs, man.
Yeah, I'm very excited for this as well. Do you want to tell people a little bit about your background, a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So like Justin said, I work with the Phoenix and the Surge, both out of Philadelphia. I've been the athletic trainer for the Phoenix. This is season 8 with me for them. And this is my second season with the Surge, since they had their inaugural season last year. Much like everybody else, I got involved in Ultimate in college, and I played over at Millersville, was part of Millersville Moose. Then when I graduated, I was like, you know what? I have not had anywhere near enough of Ultimate. The general manager of the Phoenix was a college teammate of mine, and I reached out asking, saying, hey, you need any athletic training coverage? And I've been with them ever since. So it has been an absolute blast getting to work with the Phoenix for as long as I have. I'm very excited getting to work with the Surge, seeing how things have been starting off with them in 2 seasons. And I also work at the league level with the UFA, where I serve as the league lead athletic trainer. Basically, my roles and responsibilities with that, it's mostly just title right now. But mainly the league responsibilities there are upholding and maintaining the standards of practice for athletic trainers, keeping a directory of all the athletic trainers in the league so people can reach out and be like, hey, I'm not able to travel with the team this week. Here's something that some of my guys might need. Just basically that kind of stuff. And my main vision is I want to try to make sure that all the players in Ultimate have access to athletic trainers, physical therapists, getting that good kind of coverage that they need in order to make sure that they're staying healthy and staying on the field.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think, like we were just talking about before we hit record, like the professionalization of the sport takes like effort from everybody, right? So I think it's super cool that like you're really pushing that healthcare side of things, because as pretty much all Ultimate players know, like Ultimate players get injured, right?
Yeah,
and definitely at that professional level. So we got to make sure that people are getting taken care of, which is super cool. Are you working with any other sports too, or is Ultimate your full-time thing?
I wish Ultimate was my full-time thing. It's getting closer in every year, but I work through a hospital network where I'm the head athletic trainer at a local high school. So that's the main job. I also teach over at a local community college, just a couple like intro to athletic training courses and kinesiology stuff there too. But pretty much from mid-February until the end of July is all Ultimate for me, which I'm really excited for. Being able to travel with the team is something that I've been fortunate enough to do for the last couple of years. And with Philly being able to host the championship weekend for the PUL this year, I'm very excited to see how that goes too. So it's the summer of Ultimate. I've been able to have that for a while now. I try to pick up coverage at local tournaments every once in a while too. Get to see a lot of really cool club level Ultimate play there too. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. On the club side, what's coming up this season for you?
So club tryouts are getting underway now. I know a lot of the people who play with like Amp, Loco, Flight, Zephyr, and I try to do a lot of coverage with those teams. The big thing for me is there's so much time wasted, unfortunately, when the time between when it's like somebody gets hurt and they don't know what to do necessarily. They talk to their friends. They try to say like, oh, well, you banged your knee a couple of years ago. What did you do that helped it out? Or the classic Ultimate treatment, which is ice Advil and see how it feels in the morning. And vitamin I, that ibuprofen, it does not cut it. So my main thing is communicating with these players like, hey, if you need help, if you don't know what to do here, you're welcome to reach out to me. Just because I'm not physically there on site doesn't mean that I can't necessarily help. And trying to like create a network of healthcare essentially for these players. So directing them, figuring out, hey, if you have this kind of injury, this is the doctor you should be seeing. Or even if you just tweak your ankle, you don't need to go to the ER right now or anything, but let's see how it feels in the morning. Try a couple of these exercises. So with the club scene coming up, answering your question, my main thing right now is making people who are trying out for teams aware that I'm around. I'm happy to help out. If you have any questions, just shoot me a message so that I'm a little biased, but so that Philly Ultimate can stay awesome at the club level too.
For sure. And I think that like it sounds like it's just about like giving access to resources, which is the big thing. Like I've been doing a Q&A on Instagram for a while now, and I'll tell you, one of the most common questions I always get is just like, I have blank injury, what do I do? And it's like, my answer is always like, please go see a physical therapist, please go see somebody in person. Not because I don't think I can help, but it's because like my response in a paragraph on an Instagram story is probably the most irresponsible way anybody could receive medical treatment. So in your opinion, or maybe some like quick advice for players out there that are listening, like if they do have an injury, like what's one of the best things that they can do if they don't have, or if they don't know who maybe their athletic trainer is or anything, like what's something that they can do to start getting treatment?
So that is an awesome question. First of all, that was one of the way that you responded to those questions is one of the things that drew me to your profile right away, because I've seen so many people who will just like give some like cookie cutter answers, or, oh, Nordic hamstring curls are always the answer for any kind of hamstring injury. The responsibility that you showed in there too, to direct people the right way, and also giving like, the answer that you gave was absolutely perfect. So I love that too, to get things started. When it comes to injury management and Ultimate, it is tricky because if you don't necessarily have a connection with an athletic trainer, it can be kind of tough. So communicating with teammates, communicating with coaches, communicating with captains, asking, hey, is there anybody that you have worked with in the past that has been helpful for you? That's one of the best things that you can do. For those who are listening here, maybe you're battling an injury right now. Yes, I'm in the Pennsylvania area. I'm licensed in Pennsylvania. And if you're not in Pennsylvania, I unfortunately can't take direct care of you. However, with having the connections that I do in the league, odds are there's somebody that I could reach out to in one of those cities or city adjacents that does know an athletic trainer in your region. So if you want to, if you're battling an injury, if there's something that's nagging at you and you want to try to get some help and you don't know where to start, you're welcome to reach out to me. I'm sure we'll give out info later. You're more than welcome to reach out to me, and I'd be happy to try to connect you with someone in your area, because it's all about figuring out who is the quality person to connect with, who is somebody that knows what they're talking about, who is someone that's Ultimate specific. When I was working in a physical therapy clinic when I first graduated, whenever I saw an Ultimate Frisbee player coming in, I would immediately be like, okay, dibs. I'm going to take them right away because this is something that is important to me. This is something where it's like my area of expertise. But just like you were saying earlier too, because you started your rotation with basketball now with strength and conditioning, it's a lot more fun because that's something that you are really passionate about. That's something where you really enjoy. Whereas nothing against golfers or tennis players or anything, those aren't sports that we really focus on as much. So if someone were to come into a clinic that is complaining about like, hey, I want to try to get back to tennis or get back to golf, I would refer them to someone who is golf or tennis specific. So long answer short, reach out. I'd be happy to connect you with someone in your area to figure out what is going on specifically with you. How can we help get you the care that you need? It's all about figuring out who is going to be the right person to help take care of you instead of trying to turn to Dr. Google.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'll, like you mentioned, we'll put your contact info down in like the description or the show notes or anything, so people can go down there and find that. But I guess timeline wise, I think that's usually kind of something that people think about a lot. I know for me personally, like I usually try to give it a couple days just to kind of see like, okay, is this something that I really need to be concerned about, or is this something that's going to go away pretty quick? I mean, I'm 24. And I know a lot of people like that are younger than me too. Like they could fall off of a cliff and they'll probably bounce right back if you're like 18 or 19 or whatever. So I know in a couple of days, like you'll be fine. But timeline wise, are there important considerations?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm jealous of the 24 being able to bounce back so quick. As a 31-year-old, getting out of bed after playing some pickup the night before can be kind of challenging. When it comes to these important timelines, there's a couple general rules that you want to think about. The number one most common injury that I have seen in Ultimate, and when I was contributing to the old AUDL injury study, were hamstring-related injuries. It's really important for individuals to be able to figure out the difference between tightness, soreness, and sharp pain. If you are feeling sharp pain, odds are there's an acute injury, something that was like a rapid onset, where it's like, okay, this is something where you should shut down immediately. This is something where you don't want to stress it too much further. Whether as compared to like soreness, achiness, that kind of feeling, that's something where you can try to like play through. When it comes to timelines of an injury, if you like roll your ankle, for example, which is another super common injury in Ultimate, if it immediately blows up and you're unable to put to weight bear on it, that's one where it's like, okay, it's not going to hurt to go get an x-ray. If it's something where you just have a quick tweak, you're able to walk afterwards and it's still swelling, then it might not be something where you're as concerned about. The big tell for ankle injuries is, are you able to walk on it? Are you able to weight bear? And if you are, there's a good chance that nothing is necessarily fractured. There could still be a sprain in there. Now, sprains affect ligaments, strains affect muscle. So the big thing is getting it checked to be sure. When it comes to the timeline, it's not going to kill you to wait a day. Like if it happens at like a rec league or league at like 8 o'clock at night and you're hurting, then you don't necessarily need to go to an ER unless your leg is blowing up, or if the bone is sticking out, then obviously, yes, go. But giving it a night to see how it feels is something that is generally safe and is generally okay. It might seem like an emergency to you, which is super valid to you listening. If it's like, okay, oh my gosh, like I can't go play the universe point. Yes, that is something that is an emergency to you. That's something that's really upsetting for sure. But to your body, it's not necessarily a life-threatening emergency. So you don't need to rush yourself to an urgent care or an ER right away. But if you want to get imaging done, that is my general recommendation. Wait a day, see if things are blowing up. If they are improving over the course of the first 24 to 72 hours, odds are it's not something that's going to be something super severe. There's a big difference between being injured and being limited. If you're injured, you're completely out. You're not able to do anything. If you're limited, maybe you're not hitting those full field sprints, chasing down the huck. So figuring out those limitations, adhering to those kind of timelines, that's generally how I try to approach my care.
Yeah, absolutely. And then kind of back to what you were saying earlier about like the vitamin I, so like the ibuprofen and the icing and stuff that people kind of jump straight to. Do you have recommendations for when and how to apply that to?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I can't take credit for calling it vitamin I. That's Mike Campanella of the Phoenix who introduced me to that. So Mike, if you're listening, shout out to you there. When it comes to proper administration of that kind of stuff, if you're having more of that soreness or achiness, that's when it's okay for ibuprofen is generally when I recommend it. But of course, consult with your doctor first if there's any kind of like underlying conditions. Of course, I don't want to just say, hey, take fistfuls of ibuprofen and you'll be fine. Soreness, that's pretty well combated with ibuprofen. However, if you're having a sharp injury where like you rolled your ankle, you're having a tough time walking around, you're like, I need to get back out there. So you're taking a couple ibuprofen and trying to go back out there. That's where it can be a little problematic. Reason being, while it helps cover up the pain, it's not helping cover up the injury. The body sends these painful signals to let us know, hey, something's up. We need to take care of this. And what might be like a grade 1 sprain where there's minimal tearage of that ligament, if you're masking the pain and your body's trying to go past that, you could turn that into a more severe one, like a grade 2 or grade 3, where originally you might be looking at a couple days of soreness or a couple days of limitation. That could turn into a couple weeks or possible surgical intervention. Now, when it comes to ice, one of the things that drives me nuts is if I see some players icing at halftime of game or anything. Ice is really good at killing pain, yes, but it also slows down that metabolic system pretty effectively. By that, I mean it slows down the blood flow going to areas, it slows down muscle contraction, and why would you want to be going slower in a game? That's where you want to be at your peak performance. Ice is really good for after the fact, for helping to kill some of that pain, especially if you're battling things like shin splints or muscle aching, muscle fatigue. But I generally recommend, if you are feeling sore or feeling tired in game, keep moving on the sidelines, walk around. You can grab a seat and do some flutter kicks. If you're fortunate enough where your team has like a portable stationary bike, that's one of the things that is my absolute favorite. I feel like my high schoolers at where I work, they get sick of me saying, okay, hop on the bike for a warm up, or hop on the bike between quarters. But it works so well. If you can keep your blood flowing and keep those muscles limber, keep them easy contractible, you will increase your performance.
And I mean, I think there's a reason too, like you're saying, that like if you look at any other professional sport, you're always going to see a stationary bike on the sidelines.
Yep.
Right? Like NBA players, they get hurt, you'll see them like kind of in the tunnel back to the locker room on the stationary bike. NFL, you'll see it on the sideline too. Mm-hmm. And I think too, like if we think to like the stereotypic dad who's very, very hard on their like 8-year-old kid at T-ball, right? They get hurt. They don't say, oh, go take some ibuprofen. Oh, go ice it. They say, no, slap some dirt on it and walk it off, right? Because that blood flow is what's going to help people feel better. And I think like one thing that I would like caution people to kind of think about too, because I think that's great advice. Like I don't have like a general recommendation for like ibuprofen and ice. So I think that's really great. But what I like usually help or try to inform like clients or just teammates and stuff on is like, if we think back to how the body works, like there's thousands and thousands of years of like evolution where like the body figure out how to heal itself, right? We think about like cavemen or, our prehistoric times when like if there was a twisted ankle, again, we weren't icing things or we weren't taking ibuprofen, like we'd walk it off and the body figured out how to heal itself. And then now it's only the last like 50 or so years where suddenly like, oh, ice it, oh, ibuprofen. Like we think we're smarter than how our body has figured out over hundreds and hundreds of years how to heal itself. So I always like to just like let your body kind of do its thing. Like, yeah, give it that blood flow, just give it that oxygen and those nutrients. And like, it's a lot of times it'll kind of help figure itself out too, in a way.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. The body is really good at healing itself if you give it a chance. There's a reason that inflammation occurs. And inflammation, so many times people have like, the healthcare industry has done a really good job of villainizing inflammation when it's just our body trying to help heal or recognize a problem. Now, just like anything else, there can be too much of it and that can become detrimental. But if you manage it properly, it's pretty darn good for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Kind of shifting gears back to what you were saying about like the most common injuries. So you mentioned hamstring, mentioned ankle. Any other like really big injuries that you see in Ultimate?
So the big ones that I've been seeing lately, I've been seeing a fair amount of shoulder stuff, but not because of like overuse of throwing. I've been seeing it because of the mechanisms of how people have been laying out. This will be great for a podcast because I'm going to demo what it looks like. But if you're bringing your grabbing arm across your body and you're landing with chest, arm, and then ground, I've been seeing a lot of like impingement or issues in the rotator cuff there. And it's not because people are tearing the muscles in there. It's because the shoulder is the most mobile joint that we have in the body, and therefore it's the least stable. And when it lands, when you have an issue like that, all the muscles try to tense up and splint itself. And with the sport where there's so much throwing involved, people have been coming up and saying like, oh yeah, I've been having issues, like especially like I'm not getting enough zing on my flicks, or when I try like an over the top backhand, that's where I'm having pain. What can I do about it? So that's been the most common thing as of late, just impact-based shoulder injuries, but it's not to the point where there's like AC joint sprains or fractured clavicles, none of that kind of stuff. It's more of like a manageable thing. And when I talk to my athletes about this kind of stuff too, it's, again, there's a big difference between being injured and feeling pain. I always try to refer to it as, oh yeah, the muscle group just needs some tune-up work, because you're not going to instantly become weaker just from laying out or anything unless a muscle completely tears off the bone or if the bone fractures. But if it's that minimal stuff where there's a lot of tightness, people sometimes will say, yeah, this feels kind of weak. So I just try to refer to it as like tune-up work that's needed in that area. But the big three this season so far in Ultimate that I've been seeing are hamstrings, ankles, and that shoulder work. And the nice thing too is, as I'm sure that you've been seeing from the strength and conditioning side, hamstrings, it's so easy to try to reduce that risk of having a hamstring strain. And I've been loving seeing a lot of those exercises that you've been posting with it too. Nordics are obviously something that everybody loves to do, but not everyone can fully complete. But if you can complete like your eccentric hamstring work, get a sprint progression program going on like you've been sharing, it's been so helpful. And I've been loving seeing all that kind of stuff.
Real quick, I want to talk about the sponsor of today's episode. They've been the sponsor for a lot of episodes. This is Breakmark Ultimate. They are a jersey apparel company. They were the ones that helped out my team, San Antonio Alamode, the club team I played for this past season, with some jerseys, some awesome designs. So if you're a high school team, college team, club team, or just any sort of team looking for some jerseys, I think Breakmark Ultimate is a great option. They're also the ones helping me out with this TOBU Fitness merch. It's the stuff that you see me wearing in pretty much all my videos now. So if you're interested in getting some jerseys, or if you're interested in helping out your boy and getting some TOBU Fitness merch, make sure you check out the links down in the show notes, or you can check out the link in my bio on Instagram if you're looking for some more information. Let's get back to the show.
Thank you. Yeah. I try to go away from like you're saying the Nordics, but like the a lot of people when they present Nordics, it's in this like bulletproofing like type package, right? It's like we can just bulletproof the knees, and it's like it's a little bit deeper than that. What have you found anything that's been like super effective for like preventing those hamstring injuries? 'Cause I know injury prevention is like a kind of a hot thing now, and we can't fully prevent injuries, but like for reducing the risk, like you're saying, or even just like that tune-up work, like what kind of stuff have you found has been effective?
Yeah, I'm really glad that you mentioned that too. Injury prevention is something that is super hot right now. I try to reframe it as injury risk reduction because there's only so much that we can control. And if you're still doing this program and an injury does occur, it could be just because like an outside factor right there. And sometimes the mentality of the athlete can be like, well, I did all this stuff and I failed anyway. So it can be really devastating to think of it that way. So what I try to do is I try to reframe it as injury risk reduction. To answer your question with that, when it comes to ultimate specific stuff, I try to do things that are mirroring what's going to happen in game. So reaction-based exercises are something that I really like. There's one that I've been doing with the Phoenix and Surge that I call red light, green light, where basically what I'll do is I'll take two discs and I'll hold them up. I'll be standing about 20 yards away from the athlete, and their goal is to get past me. They're only allowed to run forward when the discs are turned. And so I can also like adjust it where it's like, okay, go right, go left, pedal forward, back, and then when they do get past me, I hit them with an upline pass. So all reaction-based style stuff is stuff that I find to be extremely helpful. Just because of that acceleration, deceleration, it's all about that muscle loading, how the neuromuscular function responds to it, how the nerves and the muscles communicate, because that's the way that injury occurs, is not necessarily a failure to communicate, but a failure to handle that proper loading. So the more ultimate specific that you can get, if you are in a position where you are not currently facing any injuries, the more prepared that you will be. Obviously, if you're battling an injury, you might be limited. You might not be able to like sky somebody the way that you would like or hit a full sprint. But if you are at a position right now where you're not battling any injuries, but you've maybe had some in the past and you're concerned about how to properly handle it, sport-specific reaction-based drills are the ones that I generally try to do. The only disadvantage of that I've been finding is it only hits the lower body. It doesn't really do too much for that upper body stuff. But I mean, if you're looking for lower body injury risk reduction, reaction-based drills are probably the best thing that you can do, in my opinion.
Yeah. Can you talk about why reaction-based might be better than as opposed to maybe like if I set out some cones and I wanted to do kind of similar type movements?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of these injuries have been occurring on the defensive side of things. And the reason for that is if you are an offensive cutter, you have practiced and you know where you're going to go. You know, okay, I am planning on making this out route. I know I'm making an in cut. I know that I'm doing that. Great. The defender has to react to what the offensive player is doing, and their body has to make that quick adjustment right away. That's why reaction-based stuff is so very important. If you're doing cones, you know exactly what you're doing. You know, okay, if I'm doing a box drill, I'm going to run to the cone ahead of me, then I'm going to make a hard cut to the right, then I'm going to make another hard cut to the right. Great. That's still very important. That's something that is valuable to have. But if you have reactionary-based drills where you have somebody who's with you that's saying, okay, turn right or turn left, you don't know what you're doing right away until you get that verbal command or a whistle or any kind of external stimuli. That is an added factor. That's something that's not a controllable in your situation. And in games, you're going to be faced with a lot of non-controllable situations. You don't necessarily know where the person you're defending is going to go. You don't know what you're going to have to do to shake that defender. So the more that you can practice that, or the more that you can recreate that in a controlled environment, the more that your body is going to be prepared for that, as opposed to facing it right away.
I really like how you're saying, like, you try to make it as ultimate specific as possible. Because I think, like, when we're talking about agility, like, you can do like those, I'm sure you've seen it, where it's like the people have those like lights and they like light up and then you have to go touch the light and stuff like that. Which is like, it's exactly what you're saying. It's like reacting to a stimulus, but how specific is that to ultimate? Because we're not going up and touching lights in ultimate, right? So if you wanted to make it fun, probably more cost effective, because those lights are probably pretty expensive, then you can just get some discs, or you can just get a partner, like you're saying. So yeah, I think that's super, super cool. Any other maybe like gym type work that people can do by themselves that you've found has been really good for either like the shoulder, the ankle, hamstring, anything in general?
Yeah, I'm going to start from the ground and work my way up then to help out with some of those exercises. I really like box jumps. I really like not necessarily death jumps, just because there's not going to be a real point in ultimate where you're jumping down from a height. Jumping up is something that I really like. So if I'm doing my box jumps, I will jump straight up onto it and then I'll step down to do those. When it comes to ankle proprioception, ankle balance, trying to get your landing mechanics down is something that's really important. It's something that I wish the athletic trainers and the healthcare staff for Joel Embiid would do a little bit more, working on the landing mechanics. So like 2-to-1 hops, going from 2 feet to 1 foot or 1 foot to 1 foot, focusing on the landing, not focusing on rapid fire stuff. When you're doing that, you can have some weights in each hand too, to try to help simulate like, okay, maybe I'm going to get bodied as I'm on my way down, and I can focus on sticking the landing for my foot. I'm not as keen on doing it like landing on like a foam pad or anything, because, well, unless the field is garbage, you're not going to be landing on a foam pad out there. So trying to simulate what's going to be exactly like the field. Any of that proprioceptive work is going to be good for the knee as well. General strength training is also good. I like leg presses. I like the quad extensions, just to try to keep it simple. If you're working on strength training, you want to make sure your muscle is firing the way that it's supposed to. So you don't need to be setting up like all these cables and different machines. Just keep it simple. The knee is meant to do extension. Work on extension when you're doing that. Same with the hamstring curls, with hamstrings being the number one injury that we see in ultimate. I really like my eccentric hamstring curls. And what that means is emphasizing extra loading when the muscle is straightening out. So what I'll do is, if I'm on the hamstring curl machine, I've got the curl going, I'll go down with 2 legs. I will take 1 leg away so that all the load is on the other leg, and then straighten that leg out with just the one. So that's one that I really like doing. When it comes to shoulder work, again, all about that stability. Just making sure that you're doing stuff to hit every muscle group is good. So, I mean, like, you can get your pec flies, your chest press, your reverse pec flies, bicep curls. One of my favorite tools that I use, and I know that most gyms don't generally have it, is called a body blade. Body blade is fantastic for shoulder stability. I'm not sponsored, I promise. But just going through the different motions of throwing is something that I really enjoy. Getting that body blade, making sure that it's like going through the different, like for potential backhand, for flicks. And the big one too, I do want to promote this stretch in particular. A lot of times people have been coming to me complaining that they're having pain in their shoulder on that backside run underneath that shoulder blade, especially when they're winding up for flicks. The sleeper stretch to try to hit those external rotators is one that I think that all ultimate Frisbee players, if you're not currently dealing with an injury, should be doing. It stretches out those external rotators so nicely. Maybe that's something where I can post a picture or share a picture of this later, but it's laying down on your side, putting your hand below that wrist and just pushing, and you'll get a really good stretch in your back along there to hit those external rotators that gets so overlooked. Because nobody goes to the gym thinking, oh, it's internal, external rotation day at the gym. So
yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's actually a good idea. We could probably make an Instagram post about this so that people would be able to see that one too. But yeah, that's interesting you bring that up, because that's one thing I've noticed myself, and then a lot of clients, is like when I take a look at shoulder rotation, like an external rotation. So for the listeners, like being able to, if you have your arm or your elbow at 90 degrees and your there's a 90 degree angle at your armpit, 90 degree at your elbow, and then you rotate your hand back. But yeah, I've noticed in like into external rotation, like people have a lot of range of motion. Like I have pretty good range of motion, but then into internal rotation, like I'm a lot more limited, and I think a lot of people are limited as well. Have you found that like, is that because of maybe the throwing motion? That's always been my guess, is like in a flick, it's probably advantageous to be able to go back into a lot more external rotation. But yeah, have you found anything specific around that?
Yeah, I would think that that's generally the case. One thing that we could do, and one thing that teams could do, is a little bit of GERD screening, which is that gross internal rotation deficiency. That's something that we did at the high school. We implemented this past year. One of my coworkers took the lead on that for our overhead throwing athletes, where we measured between both arms, the dominant and the non-dominant hand, just measuring how much internal rotation can they actually get. And for people who are heavy overhead throwers, like pitchers, for volleyball players, for water polo, those are the ones that are having that internal rotation deficiency. And the theory behind that is because they spend so much time in the cocking phase where they're bringing the arm back. And when they get all that power on that follow through and release, they're stopping really quickly instead of having a proper follow through. So the theory behind it is, and if we're rotating from the side, that cocking phase, that wind up phase, you're bringing it back, you're able to get that motion in external rotation. But as soon as you release, people aren't following through properly. And I see it a lot, not necessarily as much at the pro level, but definitely rec league for myself too. When you're trying to get a flick, you just stop and you're pointing where you're going instead of having a proper follow through. Now, the question is, are they not following through because that's how they taught, or are they not following through because those external rotators are so tight and it's not working? It's a chicken or egg situation. What has been helping, though, is getting that sleeper stretch, trying to stretch out those external rotators, because they have that kind of relationship with the internal rotators, where if the external ones are tight, you're going to have limited internal rotation. And the theory is it's because of that throwing motion. So,
yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah. How I always look at it, and how I've kind of framed it too, is like, if you don't have that requisite mobility, then it's like you can do everything you want, but like your body physically cannot get into that position. So if your body just does not have that that internal rotation, like you can try to follow through all day, like you're trying to get your body to do something that it physically cannot do. I think the easiest thing for people to like be able to visualize is for the lower body. Like if you don't have good hip mobility, if you don't have good ankle mobility, like you can have a coach or a captain yell at you all day to stay low. Like if you physically cannot get low, your body's not going to be able to do it. So that's the level one, essentially, is like make sure that your body can actually do what you're asking it to do. But I guess kind of while we're on that topic of mobility, like that's a huge question, right? A big topic as well. Back to like the bulletproof thing, like that's their whole thing is making sure that you are mobile. But like mobility, people often think of stretching, right? What's your thoughts on stretching?
I think getting a good warm-up is so important. I'm very much in camp dynamic warm-ups before and static stretching after. However, you can have some controlled static stretching as a warm-up, and that'll help you out. If you tune into any Phoenix games, you might see me working on James Pollard on the sideline. He and I have a nice little routine where we do some static stretching going into it. Whereas with other players, like I do some PNF work. PNF stands for proprioceptive neuromuscular function. Fact check me on that, please. I think I got that right. But the idea behind that is all muscles operate on like a pulley system, where when one contracts, the other has to relax. So if you force a maximal contraction in one, the other will have to relax. So it's really beneficial for people who have like tight hamstrings, people who have tight quads, or even tight shoulder work, tight muscles in the shoulders. You can do that. So to answer your question with that, getting a good dynamic sport-specific warm-up is very important. One of my favorite pro athletes to watch right now going through their warm-up phase is CJ Stroud, the quarterback of the Texans. I don't know if I'm sure you've seen a lot of his stuff too, is where he does like cross-training work, where before a game, he'll like swing a baseball bat, he'll hit some baseballs, he'll shoot a basketball around. And the reason why he does is it's the same concept of like cross-training, and it's also fun. If you can loosen up and have fun in your warm-up, that's a big part of it. But cross-training is something that's really cool. I think Ryan mentioned last time on his episode with you, where he saw that with the Phoenix, we did a fun style warm-up where we were like playing with a tennis ball, that kind of stuff. That was our strength and conditioning specialist, Ian Dietrich, who also plays on the team, who was coming up with some of those fun ideas too to get that cross-training going. But with a warm-up, it's really important to make sure that you're hitting as many muscle groups as you can, especially the ultimate specific ones. Legs are so very important to hit. People do not spend anywhere near enough time with that. And the big thing too is after the fact, just because the game's over, it doesn't mean that you're done playing ultimate forever. You need to help get yourself ready for whatever's coming next, especially with at the pro level, I mean, I know that we got back from DC I got home around 3:00 that night because we came home the same night. And I know people were having like amp and loco tryouts the next day. And it's like, okay, like you got to be up in like 8-9 hours. You should be prepping your body to be ready for this kind of thing too. So static stretching after the fact to try to help reduce that risk of soreness. I'm a big fan of leg drains, just propping your legs up against the wall after playing, just to try to help use gravity to do that. So dynamic before, PNF during, especially if you're starting to feel like the onset of like cramping or soreness or tightness coming on, and then static stretching after has been shown to be effective for me. But I'm curious to hear what other people's thoughts are on that too.
No, I like that. That's that's kind of what I go with too. Like, I think a lot of people try to go too quick into like the static right beforehand. What you're saying is like, sometimes it's okay, right? If you've been sitting at a desk for 10 hours and then you're going to go play in your rec league, like maybe you want to unwind just a little bit. Like, I think that's okay. But yeah, I think like overdoing it and doing like a yoga session beforehand, probably not the best idea. Yeah, definitely cut that out. But I'm really interested to hear about, like, even since Ryan mentioned it, like the kind of the fun warm up that you guys do. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so it has changed a little bit this year. Since last, but we did like a variation of like Foursquare essentially is what it looked like, where it would be like a little bit of dodgeball, a little bit of like not get the man with the ball, but a similar concept too. It's something that incorporates multiplanar agility, so not just running in one straight line, because that's not what we do in Ultimate, even unless you're the person at pickup who only cuts deep, in which case be a better teammate. But the main goal of having a fun warm-up is something where it's, yes, we're here to play Ultimate. It's awesome that we get to go and travel to go throw some plastic, but we also want to have fun with this too. So let's try something a little different. Incorporate like chasing down a ball, playing tag too. Tag is such a good warm-up. There's a reason that it's so good for kids too, because it's all about that, again, reactionary based stuff, staying loose and just straight up playing with your friends. That's the big idea behind the fun warm-up. Something that can get lower extremities moving, something that makes you laugh with your friends, and something that you're not just going from 0 to 100 into. So those are the key concepts of it. You can adopt it for however you want with your team. Some of the things like we said that we did too. Dodgeball is a really fun way to get some warm up going, so long as you're not going for like max throws and trying to knock your other teammates' teeth out. We used foam balls instead of the rubber ones. But that's the general concept behind the idea of like a fun warm up.
Yeah, I think that's super cool. And I would assume too that like a lot of the parameters are also modified to make sure that like you're saying, you're not jumping from 0 to 100. Like my thought process would be, it's kind of like mini, like how at least I know like I'm a practice player for the Soul, so I know like part of their warm up is we play mini, and it's like 3v3, and it's like, because if you do some 3v3 mini, like that's naturally just going to be a little bit less intense. Like you're not sprinting as hard, there's not as many cuts, there's not as much speed into the cuts, right? So you're not like going straight into 7v7, which would be pretty intense pretty quickly, but like that's a good kind of segue. And I assume it's kind of the same thing there, where it's like you're not asking guys to do like full field tag. It's like little smaller spaces and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Mini is the perfect way. Like if you don't want to, if you're like, yes, I just want to stick with Ultimate specific stuff, mini is a fantastic way to do it. Either mini or 10 pass is another one that that I've seen implemented well, where the goal is just, hey, you've got 3 players and you try to complete 10 passes. The defense's goal is to try to break it up too. Doing it within a smaller space, like a 20 by 20 square, then that's a really good way to do it. One of the other things that I wanted to mention with this too, when it comes to warm-ups as well, by the time that you're done warming up, you should be a little sweaty. You shouldn't be feeling gassed. You shouldn't be feeling exhausted. But the whole point of it is to, in fact, warm up. You don't want to be going into a game cold. You don't want to just be showing up and diving right into it, because that's when people are super prone to injuries. A few World Cups ago, one of the wings for the U.S. men's team, Josie Altidore, he pulled his hamstring within the first 90 seconds of the game. And that just blows my mind that at the highest level of competition, he still wasn't necessarily warmed up properly. I don't want to make assumptions, of course, too, but I mean, there's a good chance that like that could have been prevented. It was the first play of the game, essentially, where he streaks down the field trying to go into full sprint right away and got that hamstring strain, and he was out for the rest of the tournament, if I'm remembering correctly. So the purpose of that warm-up is to get things loose. You should be a little sweaty after the fact. You should be not sucking wind, but your heart rate should be elevated. That's the whole point of it. And any kind of warm-up that gets you to that point is something that's going to be beneficial.
For sure. And I think like if you're a team that often like starts slow, like if you're a self-proclaimed like second half team, that's probably a good sign that like your warm up isn't that effective too. My mind automatically goes to people who are probably thinking like, okay, but I need to do XYZ. Like, and I don't think it's their fault. Like if you've been playing sports your entire life, you've probably been warming up the same way where you've always had to do like quote unquote had to do your high knees, your butt kicks, your leg swings, your all these things. But what I would think, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this, is like if we're thinking about tag, like you're getting a lot of side shuffles, you're getting a lot of forward and back decels, you're getting a lot of side to side movements, and it's like that's the same thing as getting guys to just do like lateral shuffles in their warm up, getting guys to do karaoke in their warm up, getting guys to just sprint forward and backwards in their warm up. It's just taking it from like a controlled militaristic style where you just keep yelling at guys to lock in and focus, or instead just giving them parameters like, hey, go play tag, and they naturally take care of all the movements themselves. Is that kind of the thought process there?
Yeah, you absolutely nailed it right there too. And it's for anybody who's listening who is thinking, well, I need to do this because I haven't gotten hurt and I've done all this. I want to stick with my program. That is more than okay. It is very important to have a routine that gets you in the right mindset for playing, no matter what level that it's at too. There are certain players who listen to the same song beforehand. There's certain players who have to hit their same playlist. There's certain players who need to come over and get stretched out by their athletic trainer before playing. That is okay. We're not telling you to change that. What we are saying is consider a couple other things if you're not feeling that you're getting enough out of your warm-up too. And that's the exact point with tag too, or with having a fun style warm-up, something that gets you in a multiplanar range of different motions, something that lightens the mood with it too. My wife is also the mental performance coach for the Phoenix this year now too. And one thing that she taught me about was the concept of peak arousal when you're playing. There's players who sometimes they come in and it's the only thing they're focused on. They say they're super locked in, but if you're too hyper focused on what you're doing, if you're too hyper concerned, or if you flat out care too much about it, that's going to decrease your performance too. Not just at a mental level, but at a physical level too. It'll make you overly tense. It'll increase that risk of injury. Where on the other hand, if you're not interested enough and it's like, oh, I'm just going to go out there and have fun, I don't care, then you're too loose. You're not going to be as tuned in, you're not going to be as focused. So it's important to get in that right mindset as well. If you can hit that level where you are at that peak interest, where you're not caring too much, but you do care enough, not only is that going to increase your performance itself, but it will also reduce that risk of injury too. So that's another key concept when it comes to warming up, staying focused, but also having fun while you're doing it too. That's
super interesting. I never thought about that, where it's like being too locked in could almost be like a detriment to you too.
Yeah. Well, how many times have you seen someone like be at a pickup league or pro level where it's like if they have like a bobbled catch or drop it and they're just cursing at themselves on the sideline, if they're just like so angry, it's like, I should have had that. And that's the only thing they can talk about. It's the only thing they can focus on. Is that someone that you really want to be playing with, or someone that you really want to be throwing to next? And how much of your own time are you spending trying to like calm them down and get them to tune back into it? That's where it gets too hyper focused. And that's something that she taught me where I was like, wow, this is really interesting. And I try to incorporate it in my practice of care now.
Interesting. Yeah. So then what are there other kind of strategies to be able to like get somebody less like dialed in, so to speak?
Yeah. So focusing on controllables is one of the big things that we try to emphasize, where it's like, if somebody like gets in that like spiraling mentality of I should have caught that, or I should have done that, or I'm screwing up, or we're going to lose because of me, focusing on the controllables, reining it in, some things that you can do prior. One of the exercises that we found to be helpful is write down at least one controllable and stick it on your water bottle. And a controllable, something to the effect of not saying like, I'm not going to have any drops, because you're going to have people who maybe they have not the best throw, or maybe the sun gets in your eyes, or maybe the defender makes a great play. But a controllable, like I am going to run hard to the disc every time. Or a controllable, like I am going to hit the open man on my swing, or I'm going to throw it to the open person on the swing, or I'm not going to try any junky hammers when there's somebody wide open right there. Focusing on those controllables and going back to them, using them as like an anchor is something that's really helpful. One thing that you can do as a teammate, if you're listening and you have a teammate or someone that's coming to mind with this as well, is being there for them. There is no correlation between positive punishment, the example like in game of like yelling at somebody or benching somebody. That's not positive, that's negative. Sorry. There's no correlation between punishment and increased performance. There is, however, that positive reinforcement that has been shown to help things out. So if you have a player who has a bad drop or anything, don't yell at them. Don't berate them. Don't do anything. Find something to celebrate that they did well that point too. Or you can even say something that's like, hey, you put yourself in a position to catch that. That's great. You put yourself in a position where you were like 95% of the way there. All you had to do was catch it. You're right there. You're going to get the next one. That helps people tune back in so much better than saying, you're an idiot. How could you drop that? You need to make that play. Go sit on the bench and think about it. That doesn't help people in game whatsoever. That kind of stuff can be helpful at practice where it's like, this is what we need to work on and we're going to drill it. But if you're in a game time scenario and all that matters is that next point, that next completion, you got to be positive with that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, that's super, super interesting. Hopefully people listening can kind of take that to heart. Because I know, the stereotypic thing is just to yell at them. But interesting too, to kind of think about it in terms of like, that's okay in practice. Like if you're trying to kind of create that culture of like, growth and like, being competitive and stuff, but then in game, it's a completely different kind of situation. But as we start to kind of wrap it up here, I want to ask a couple more questions. One thing that kind of comes to mind for me is like the trajectory of the sport, like how the sport's going to continue to grow. Like I mentioned earlier, like we were talking about before, like the growth of the sport's really going to come from people like yourself putting in a lot of efforts to grow certain things. And in your case, it's like the healthcare side of it. So like, where do you see kind of the healthcare side of the sports going to? And then how will that kind of eventually grow the rest of the sport? Like, where do you see the sport kind of going?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So like I said, I've been with the Phoenix now. This is season 8 for me. And when it started, I was just covering home games. That was it. I wasn't covering practices. The fact was there wasn't any money there. So teams, even at the pro level, can't afford to hire an athletic trainer full time. It's not my full-time job, and nor should it be expected to be anytime soon. What can be changing, though, is the access level for club teams, pro level teams, college teams, pretty much anywhere. The thing that can help the sport grow is making sure that its best players are able to stay on the field. The game is at its best when players like James Pollard, Sean Mott, Jordan Ryan, all of them are able to stay on the field and make those incredible plays. Yes, I'm a little Philly biased, but whatever. The game is at its best when you're able to do that. So what we can do to try to help make sure that players are able to stay on the field is changing the way that we think about healthcare access. When people think of athletic trainers, they think of the water boys on the sidelines of NFL games who are spraying the water into the players' mouths or running out onto the field. And most of the time it's a negative connotation because they're thinking, crap, I only needed like 5 more points from that player and my fantasy game would have gone great. So you need to change the idea of what you think about how athletic trainers can help out. One of the cool things that I've been doing lately has been the idea of like the telehealth concept with athletic training too, where I'm able to have those kind of consults. Unfortunately, there's a lot of times where I'm not able to be there in person with Surge. As much as I love working with the team and as much as I'd love to be there full time, I just physically can't be in 2 places at once. So what we've been doing is I'm fortunate enough to have really good communication with these players where it's like they can reach out and they can say, hey, this has been bugging me. What can I do? And it's building that healthcare network, having the trust within that healthcare network, knowing who that you can refer to. The team physician for both the Phoenix and the Surge, Dr. Summer Hamoud, is one of the best doctors that I've ever gotten to work with. And having that trust with her, knowing that I can reach out to her and be like, hey, I've got a player who her specialty is knees. I've got a player with a knee injury, and knowing that she can get them in the next couple of days is huge. But also knowing, hey, I have a player who has a shoulder issue. She knows who to refer to. So it's all about building that network and knowing who to try to connect with to try to help it out. So changing the idea of how we can administer this healthcare and taking it seriously is so important. Ultimate players are high-level athletes just like anyone else, and the level of athleticism in this sport is insane. There's no other sport that I can think of where people are having that kind of vert, having those kind of layouts, and running like a couple miles in a game too. In football, you have that explosiveness where you're also getting tackled, but players aren't running on an average of like 5.5 to 7 miles a game there. In soccer, yes, you're having those explosive plays too, but you're not like diving out after anything unless you're going for a header, but you're not reaching the arm out unless you're the goalie. Taking your health seriously is the best way that I feel that players can controllably increase the sport. Making sure that you're taking care of yourself so that you can have that longevity. I mean, look how long like Trey Katzenbach played in the pro level, and he's still playing high level in the club scene too because he takes care of his body. He's still playing in the rec leagues too because he's taking care of himself. So to increase the visibility of the sport, the best thing that you can do as a player is taking care of yourself, listening to what your body is telling you, and not just trying to toughen through it. If you're listening to this, you obviously care about Ultimate. You care about the fitness behind it too. You should put that same kind of care into yourself. You matter, and your health matters too. So take care of yourself, keep yourself out there on the field so that we can keep watching your highlight reels for years to come and getting those other youth level players interested, because the next generation is going to want to see that. They're going to want to see you out there making that ridiculous level play. Let me and people like me be the people behind the scenes who help keep you out there.
That's a great answer. And to your point, like the older players that I know are all the ones that are the most interested in the fitness and the training side. So and it's always the younger ones that kind of get by without having to do that. And then they slowly start to fall off. Right. And then they're in my comment section talking about this is why everybody in Ultimate has knee pain, but I digress. But yeah, also kind of to your point, like Ultimate, I kind of think about this a lot I've been thinking about this a lot recently too. And like Ultimate is one of the most like demanding sports. Like you're saying, it's like you're covering similar distances to soccer, but you're having to do things that are more agile, similar to basketball. But then you're also having to be up in the air and kind of like physical with guys, kind of like not to the same extent as football, but like you have to be kind of physical with guys like football. So it's like you're combining all these different aspects of all these different sports and demanding a lot from athletes. But the big downside is we don't have all the resources that other sports have. Like professional Ultimate players very rarely are getting paid. And I don't think anybody's doing it like on a truly like full-time professional type scale, right? Whereas you look at these other sports and like they have full-time, staff members, they have millions of dollars of resources, and they're still getting hurt, right? Like you're saying, Joel Embiid, he has all these resources, he's still getting hurt. Kawhi Leonard, like never plays anymore because he's always hurt. So it's like, it's a really big challenge, I think, in the sports of like, we have such a physically demanding sport, yet we have potentially like one of the most limited amounts of like resources to be able to address that. So super, super interesting. Last question I have for you, and then I'll kind of turn the floor over to you. But this is a question I like to end all the podcasts with. Is my favorite question. I like to know what people in the sport are kind of questioning, right? So I want to know what the greatest minds in the sport are thinking. So my example is always like, I want to know what keeps LeBron James up at night thinking about basketball. So for you, like, what's the big question that you have about Ultimate, or maybe it's the healthcare side of Ultimate, that you don't have the answer to yet?
Yeah. So that is an awesome question. And I've been looking forward to this one too. Listening to your other ones, I'm like, man, I need to make sure I have a good one ready. And even now I'm stalling to make sure I can get a good question there. My main question I'm going to stick with the healthcare side of it, because I want to make sure I'm staying in my lane. My big thing is, how can we get greater buy-in for those younger athletes to take care of themselves, to help reduce the risk of those more severe injuries down the road? What is it that we as a healthcare side of the healthcare side of Ultimate can do to help keep our athletes on the field? And there's a couple different potential answers. Like, is it increasing our visibility? Is it increasing the presence at tournaments? Because there's so many people who come up to me at tournaments and it's like, oh yeah, this has been bugging me for like 2 months and I didn't know what to do. So I figured I'd talk to you now. And I'm like, dude, I have a line of like 30 people who are going to try to get taped. Like, I want to give you the attention that you deserve. Because again, you, like, everybody who's listening, anybody who goes up to get taped, you guys matter, your injuries matter. But it's like, how do we take care of that behind the scenes? And how do we extend the care beyond that coverage? That's the big question. Is telehealth the answer? Is getting each team connected with an athletic trainer the answer? But again, how do we get each team at the club, college, youth, and pro level connected with ATs? That's the kind of thing too. And not just athletic trainers, but getting strength and conditioning coaches involved, like you, getting physical therapists involved, like Ryan, who are this passionate about the care of our Ultimate players. How do we make that happen is my big question. And that's the thing that it's been years that I've been trying to figure that out. And I feel like we keep getting closer bit by bit, and I'm excited to see how it goes, but how do we legitimize it even more?
Yeah, that's a great answer there. So Josh, anything you would like to say just to kind of finish off the episode here?
Yeah. So I just answered about what I think, like what keeps me up at night it's only fair that I try to help with the solution there too. If you're listening to this, if you've gotten to this point and you're still thinking a lot of this applies to me, be it I'm an athletic trainer who's interested in getting involved more in Ultimate, or I am somebody who is involved in Ultimate who doesn't know how to manage injuries properly, or maybe not doesn't know how to manage injuries properly, but I'd like to learn more about how to manage them properly. Please feel free to reach out to me. I've always got my phone on me because I'm always waiting to hear back from my own Ultimate players to see if there's any issues that are going on or any areas that we want to try to target to improve. You're more than welcome to reach out to me. I might not be able to treat you directly myself, but I can get you in touch with somebody who can, more likely than not. The big message that I have for everybody who's listening still is your injuries and your health matter. Take care of them just as much as you would take care of anyone else on the field. You want to be out there. I want you out there. I want to see your highlight reel next. Do everything you can to stay out on the field. And the best thing you can do is listening to those healthcare professionals, be it listening to your strength and conditioning specialist, your athletic trainer, your physical therapist, or your physician. Any one of those, talk to them and take care of yourself seriously.
Awesome. And yeah, like I said earlier, you'll be able to find Josh's contact info and all that good stuff down below. But yeah, Josh, thank you very much for being on the show.
Justin, thank you so much. Keep doing what you're doing. I'm not just saying it because you brought me on, but you're my favorite strength and conditioning specialist that I've been seeing with Ultimate stuff on Instagram too. It's awesome, the stuff that you post. Everything is so sports specific and it's clinically backed. It's really cool to see. That's what drew me to your profile right away. I'm like, this is somebody who cares. It's a combination of caring, having the proper knowledge, and having the effective communication skills to get this information out there. So it's really cool to see, and I'm excited for more from you, man.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
You've been listening to the TOBU Fitness Podcast. Our passion is to be your guide in elevating your game and mastering the art of ultimate Frisbee through the lens of strength and conditioning. No hype, just substance. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, hit us up on Instagram and YouTube at TOBU Fitness. And to get info on one-on-one coaching and training programs, hit the website at TOBUFitness.com. Thanks so much for listening, and see you next time on the TOBU Fitness Podcast.